Good morning. Welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View. Brendan Rodgers yesterday in the press conference. I've watched it back a couple of times now, and towards the end of the press conference yesterday, Brendan Rodgers was asked about why you didn't bring on Shin Yamada, and his demeanour changed again. He went through various emotions yesterday in the press conference, did Brendan. He looked pissed off when he spoke about the transfer market. He got a little bit better mood when he was talking about a certain game in Europe and where we might end up travelling to, because it looks like that we will end up doing the longer version of the journey that Celtic hoped that they wouldn't. And then he was asked about substitutes and why you didn't bring on Shin Yamada and why you brought on Johnny Kenny. And he wasn't even asked about Johnny Kenny, but he did turn around and say, well, I brought in Johnny Kenny, I don't know if you noticed. And his demeanour completely changed, and he turned around to the person that asked the question and said, look, if you're going to question every single substitute that I make, we're going to be sitting here a long time. He says he brought on Johnny Kenny because Johnny Kenny's done fantastic during pre-season, and I get that. You go with the players that's given you all during pre-season. He's not seen enough of Shin Yamada to bring him on at that moment because he's not exactly sure what he can do in the game and how he can turn the game. He knows what Johnny Kenny can do. It does what it says on the tin. So the manager's always going to go with that player that has shown him in training over an extended period of time what he can do, and in games. He did the same a few years ago with David Turnbull. He got David Turnbull starting the beginning of the season when everyone said, why is he playing Turnbull when you've got Rio Hatate sitting there? Well, David Turnbull was the player that was in better form. The manager can only go what he sees on the training pitch. And if a player's in better form than someone else, we can't see that. And it was funny that Brendan Rodgers also said, it's amazing how players' values increase when they're not playing. A little dig at all the FIFA and backseat managers and tacticians of the game that have never kicked a ball in anger in their life, and they've definitely never managed a club of the size of Celtic. I think that it was quite an interesting one from Brendan yesterday. And on the other side of it, talking about it, because Chris Sutton's spoken about it in his article today, and he's spoken about the fact that Brendan, if Celtic don't meet the ambition, then it's terminado. I'd be done with it too, said Chris Sutton. I can understand where Chris is coming from. He says that Celtic have 24 days left in the window to keep Brendan Rodgers for the long term. Now, it got me thinking about this, and I've done a poll question already. And I'm going to give you my reasoning behind the poll questioning. I'm going to give you my train of thought before we go into the rest of the video. And the poll question is, would you take Paul Tisdale as the next Celtic manager and Sean Maloney as number 2? Now let's look at the CVs of both players, of both people in question. Paul Tisdale. Paul Tisdale, to start with, as a player, he was born in 1973. He's currently the head of football operations at Celtic. It's a bit of a strange one for him to go from football manager to a head of football operations when you see his CV. But as a player, he played for Southampton, he played for Bristol, he played for Yeovil Town, he played for a couple of other teams abroad, and then Sheffield Wednesday and stuff. But then he went into football managing after his career had finished, which was interesting. He started off in Bath, you would think. She's not going to do much. He then went to Exeter City in 2006. He taken up the manager's position in the National Conference site with Exeter City. He then got the Milton Keynes Dons job. Now, the Milton Keynes one's interesting because he was at Milton Keynes around about the time that they knew the Matt O'Reilly situation. So keep with me with this one, because there is an interesting train of thought. So he went from Milton Keynes to Bristol Rovers after a 12-month break, a sabbatical, just like what Brendan Rodgers wanted to do before he came to Celtic. He then went to Colchester United and then went to Stevenage. And you're thinking, he's not a top-level manager, really, is he? But then all of a sudden, he gets the head of football operations job at Celtic. When he was at Stevenage, having won 3 of 21 matches as manager. He was chased out the door at Stevenage. And he's meant to be some kind of football doctor. The reason that I'm thinking, could Paul Tisdale and Sean Maloney be the next management duo, is because Celtic have went down this road before with Ronnie Dyler. They went through a very successful period under Neil Lennon, and then Ronnie Dyler was meant to be brought in as Neil Lennon's number 2 originally. And it just got me thinking, what if the worst comes to the worst? Because Chris Sutton says, look, when it comes to it, it's a two-edged sword. And after listening to Celtic supporters, because Chris Sutton still does a lot of Celtic events, he said he finds the entire situation at best bizarre, at worst ridiculous at this stage of the window. He says, I'm now going to give you a caveat in my next 2 statements with 2 things. One, Rodgers has made it clear that no one really knows what he's thinking apart from himself, although that face yesterday at the press conference gives you a little insight to the way that he's maybe thinking. And then 2, Celtic still have enough time to make quality signings to satisfy the manager's wishes before the deadline of September the 1st. But looking from the outside, he can only see one outcome, Chris Sutton. And if the transfer situation isn't addressed quickly, Celtic aren't going to show the ambition that the manager has to take the club forward. Don't even bother talking about extending contracts, because it'll be done, over, terminado, as Chris Sutton said. And I think that it's right. And I know I said that I wouldn't talk about the manager's situation, but it just got me thinking, the way that Celtic sometimes come up with some crazy-ass ideas. Sean Maloney, with all his experience as a manager and as a number 2, you know, there could be, I don't know, I could be wide off the mark. Yes, I do agree with that. And it could be one of the craziest polls that we've ever done. But when you think about it, it's Celtic all over. And it's the type of thing that Celtic would do. Because let's face it, no big manager is going to come to Celtic after Brendan Rodgers and think that they're going to be able to make us better in the Champions League. Think that they're going to be able to do more than what Brendan or Ange Postecoglou done. Because they're not really, are they? Let's face it, with the financial restraints on the club. And this is why I think that Paul Tisdale and Sean Maloney could be in the thinking of the current Celtic board. They always like to promote within. Scott Brown's not ready for it. Scott Brown's nowhere near ready for it. And when you think about it, it's just something to think about on a Saturday morning. But as that's a disgrace if it's they 2 up next for us, embarrassing. When Ronnie Dyler came into Celtic, do you know, Brownie's Craigie White, Scott Brown's not going to get rid of his current number 2. Scott Brown will never get rid of his best mate. That's his best mate. Scott Brown, and with big Chris Sutton as his right hand man, sounds better than Tisdale, Emmerdale and Maloney. Everything to do with Celtic is negative, and that's the board that's making it. It's not. I think yesterday was a fantastic news day for Celtic. I think that I said on the video yesterday that I think that the Johnny Kenny, if you can't see the positives out the Johnny Kenny situation after all the players that have left the club, you need to give yourself a shake, because yesterday was a bit of good news for Celtic as far as I'm concerned. When you look at the way that younger players have went before. Who's Paul Tisdale? What the fuck? Is someone having a laugh? Our board should be ashamed. We haven't improved from last year. Paul Tisdale is the football doctor that is our head of football department. He is the head of our football department. Maloney and Brown, it's never going to happen. Dream team, just like Doug Leash and Barnes. Well, you know how that worked out. I mean, Doug Leash and Barnes, that didn't work out too well. Although Doug Leash did win a trophy as interim manager. So if Brendan Rodgers leaves, I want Martin O'Neill. That'll never happen. Martin O'Neill is happy in the role that he has within television. We'll end up with Strachan back at this board. That's just wrong. And so is that picture. Johnny Kenny's definitely a good news story. There we go. At least a fan that has a sensible mind at last, Gareth. Johnny Kenny was definitely a good news story in my opinion. Now let's sign a couple of wingers, for fuck's sake. Yeah. Let me just check something here. Let me just check. There is. So anyway, there is people that have voted. There have people that have voted 7%. The 7% are completely bonkers, if you ask me. Anyway, in other Celtic news, I have to watch the press conference yesterday with the manager and talking about certain situations and the fact that there's no new players incoming. Let's talk about the players that we have been linked with. First of all is the striker, the Slovan Bratislava striker, David Strelic. Complete waste of money, if you ask me. But it could be that he's just going through a bad patch at his current club and he's not highly motivated. But there's one thing, in the last game that I watched him play, and he got hauled off before the end of the game, I don't think that he's any better than Adam Ida, and that's saying something. So Strelic, for me, I don't think it's a goer. But you know the way that Celtic go. For £7 million, will they close in on Strelic before the end of the window? I hope not, because if he can't turn up in a Champions League qualifier, what are we expecting him to do at Celtic in deep, dark December up in Aberdeen away? And a couple of wingers that we've been mentioned with. Again, Celtic have went in low balling. Jacob Broom. We went in with a low ball offer for him. The go-ahead player. The go-ahead executives have said that Celtic need to take a leaf out of another club's, the way that they work their transfer activity. And that was embarrassing enough. Another player that we have been linked with, we went in with a low valuation once again, Adam Obert. His valuation was something like 6 million, and Celtic go in with an offer of 3 million. So we'll wait to see what can be done with all these. But at the end of the day, Brendan Rodgers says, look, there's nothing going to happen. Nothing going to happen at all in the immediate future when it comes to players coming in the door. Anyway, the Falkirk Cup tie tickets are on sale now for season ticket holders. Season ticket holders are reminded they have until 9 a.m. this coming Monday, the 11th of August, to secure your seat. Are you going to go to the Cup game? Or is it just a step too far that Celtic haven't given you anything on your season book? In the good old days, you would get at least one pre-season friendly on your book, and you would get a early round in the cup and on your season ticket. Now Celtic want 25 smackaroonies. Yep, Celtic want 25 quid for an adult for the Falkirk game, and they want 17 for a concession and 12 for the under 13s. Celtic ticket holders in section 117 are going to be unavailable, and if you're in the home ticket scheme in 117, you will get moved section. How do you feel about that? Anyway, the general sale will start at 2 p.m. on Monday. Exciting stuff. Let's jump into the comments section and see what some folk are saying. Young manager in Scotland doing well. David Gray might be worth. Jesus, come on. Now let's get Johnny loaned out and bring a striker in. Yeah, Michelle, you know that's going to happen. I think that Johnny Kenny will be put on loan before the end of the window, but Celtic will bring in another striker beforehand. It's just the way that it goes. Johnny Kenny, good news, but doesn't fix the immediate problem, says Chris. Yeah, it doesn't fix the immediate problems, but if you're going to complain about all the younger players that are leaving, that have left the club doing the right thing and getting one of the younger players to sign a 5-year or 4-year deal is fantastic news. Don't know, it is the only way to look at it. Jim Goodwin, big Celtic fan, like his demeanour. If the club are always sitting on their arse doing nothing, most of the time someone should tell the people who run the club, we are not a company, we are a football club. Well, I think that well, no. Kenny's a no-brainer, low wage, low maintenance, maybe work out. If not, his selling fee will cover it. I think that the fact that Celtic had an offer on the table for Johnny Kenny of 500,000 with him in the last year of his contract. Remember that this season was his last season. It's good that Celtic got this piece of business done early. You know, there's too many players being allowed to see out the end of their contract. There was an £8 million player that was valued at 8 million was allowed to walk away from the club for zero in the summer due to Celtic's inability to bring in a player that was better than him and give Celtic adequate backup. The fact that Brendan Rodgers spent most of the interview yesterday talking about value for money is very much a change in the demeanour of Brendan Rodgers. Talking about, last season he spoke about, look, it's not the player that picks the valuation. It's not the player that picks what he's paid. What Celtic are paid? It's the club. And there's a definite change in the atmosphere from Brendan Rodgers in saying that it's all about value for money for the club going forward. Now, what is value for money? You're not going to go out and be able to pick out a Matt O'Reilly type player for $1.5 million. I mean, Benji might still come good, and the 1 point whatever million we paid for Benji, if he had 3 or 4 years on his contract, he's a £6 million player that he was valued at. So we'll wait and see. Strelic is garbage. I would rather no sign. I'd rather sign no one than him. Exactly. I think that only going on the game that I watched him in the Champions League qualifier, it was do a poll on Rodgers if the fans want him. I think one poll's enough. I'd rather have Paul Daniels than Paul Tisdale, but he's dead. Oh jeez. Basically we won't sign any other players. For the Champions League qualifier. There will qualify for the Champions League. Shameful on the board. The Celtic board are on the brink of throwing away 40 million if the unthinkable happens, and we do not qualify for the Champions League, I think that the writing would be on the wall for Brendan. I mean, Brendan Rodgers was set a set of objectives when he came into Celtic. Continue winning the league Win as many trophies as you can and make us better in the Champions League. Last year he did that. He got pass marks. Even Chris Sutton said that. There's no one that could sit down with Brendan Rodgers. I mean, was it Brendan Rodgers' fault that we didn't win? And he spoke about it yesterday in the press conference. He said, look, it's the first one that I've lost is at Celtic. It was a hard one to take. It took us a long time to get over it. You know, we went into the summer on a big downer. A lot of the players went into the summer on a big downer, and it took them quite a while to get over that loss of the cup final. It took the manager a long time to go over. But as a leader, he said, it's up to me to motivate the players and get them back up and reinvigorated for the season ahead. And he says, you know, at a club like Celtic, you have the transfer window. The transfer window, you can either get some players in early on in the transfer window, and then you have a lull. And then it all gets all spicy the last 3 weeks of the window. And that's generally when Celtic kick into action. Because let's face it, that's when we kicked into action last season. And yes, it would be good for us all to get our players in early and get everything done and dusted. But it's just not the way that Celtic work, is it? We better not sign that Obert. His fans say he's hopeless. Oh, Jesus. I love the boy Kenny. Happy he extended his contract too, but hate the board's signing policy. Wait and see if we qualify for the Champions League before making big signings. Yeah, it's the way it is, isn't it? The old season book was the Bible, filled with discount vouchers. It was that, wasn't it? I'm just... with our current squad, we are at massive risk of losing our grip on Scotland. I don't think so. Any fans going to the game should stay outside the ground, and the board won't listen to an empty ground. You'll never get fans. If fans have got tickets, they will not go into the game. I can see that there's more chance of people just saying, do you know what, it is a home, but there's over 25,000 on the home ticket cup scheme. You know, the home ticket cup scheme guarantees Celtic take the money out your bank anyway. Unless you've opted out of the home ticket cup scheme, the money's going to come out your bank. So Celtic are in a win-win situation that they're going to have 25,000 tickets sold no matter what. And that's the reality of the situation. So you could get your ticket taken out. You get the money taken out for your ticket, but... would you then stay out the ground? Great news about Kenny signing a 5-year contract. Now get him out on loan. It's a 4-year contract. It's only here at 2029. That's not going to happen. This is 20, and there's a lot of people saying that. Actually, there's a few WhatsApp groups that I'm in, and people are starting to think it is. It is a similar type of feeling to the season. I do not think that Kenny will go out on loan, as we need at least 3 strikers. You've got to remember, you've got Callum Osmond that was brought in to be third choice striker. I think that Johnny Kenny, the thinking behind, you've got to think back to what Brendan Rodgers said last season. Before Johnny Kenny got any game time at the end of last season, Celtic had already decided to extend his contract, and they were thinking about the possibility of putting him out on loan. That was already spoke about last season. You know, this contract that he got yesterday, signed yesterday, or the day before, wherever he signed it, this isn't a new thing. It's something that had been in the works since last season. And it's just great that Celtic got it over the line. And it was great that Johnny Kenny was asked about it during pre-season. And he said, yep, I'll sign the contract tomorrow. It's a matter of time of when we can get it done. When you've got pre-season and you're playing in different countries, it's kind of hard to get agents and everybody round the table. Once we're back at Celtic Park, the first game of the season's underway, that's the time when, you know, we're not going anywhere. So that was the time to get that deal done and dusted. And for me, it was a fantastic piece of news, because before the window closes, you wanted that deal done. And that's why it was important, because it kind of puts off any offers coming in for him. You know, it could have been Bolton could have come in with £1 million offer. And Johnny Kenny went, do you know what? I might actually jump at that. Am I going to stay at Celtic and be second, third choice striker? Or do you know what, Gaffer? I might just jump at that. And then that changes the dynamics of everything. So getting this deal done for Johnny Kenny before the window closes was paramount piece of business for Celtic. You cannot the importance of getting that deal done before the end of the window is just absolutely magnificent for me, and it puts anyone that is thinking about coming in and paying for them now, well, it's going to cost you millions and millions and millions. The board says company on the tin, unfortunately. Yeah, it does that. At this point in the window, do we think, this is Max, we'll see, I think we're going to see 4, I still say 4 players will come in before of the end of the window. I still think 4 players will come in. The board has no ambitions in Europe. I don't understand this because it's where the big bucks are. Yeah. I wish Kyogo would have seen out his contract, especially after watching him last night. Did he play last night for Birmingham? What nonsense was Martin Hale going on about? Esmond won't splash the class like last season. Nah, he's not. He's not going to, is he? I'm just trying to show some of these comments. Lot of negativity saying that the board watched Birmingham wasn't a good idea for my blood pressure. I don't get people that will go and watch Celtic players. For me, he's left the club. Do you know what I mean? We move on. We move on from him. We need to really think about the club and the current situation. There's no use looking backwards. Don't look back in anger, I heard you say. Brendan Rodgers as a manager is okay. His tactics are poor. His signings last year both have been disappointing. His tactics are poor. How can you say his tactics were poor when the results that we got away in Italy last season against the team that won the Europa League, getting a draw away to Italy was a fantastic result, and everyone at the time said it was a tactical bit of genius by Brendan Rodgers. I just find it interesting. Tell us why you think his tactics are poor. Just an interesting one. It was just there were so many people were pleased with Brendan Rodgers' tactics last year that he changed it. He didn't stick to the formation that he's done before. You know, he went into that game really defensive minded, knowing that we could not afford to lose the game. A point away to Italy was always going to be a fantastic result in terms of Champions League. The game before in Germany, we got completely spanked because we played the attacking type of football. If we went and played the same type of football in Italy and got spanked again, I could say, yes, you're right, his tactics are friggin' woeful. But he didn't. He changed it and went completely defensive. So tactically, he's an astute manager. So, but some people think his tactics are poor. But that's what it's all about. It's all about opinions. It is all about opinions. I'm going to try remain hopeful, says Paul. We'll sign what we need, but the doubts are creeping in due to the time left. It's not. We hadn't signed at this point last year. We hadn't signed Adam Ida, we hadn't signed Arnie Engels, and we hadn't signed Luke McCowan. Just saying. At the same point last year. Do you know? Brendan refusing to sign players. Is Brendan refusing to sign players that's been recommended to him by the board, or the board making a statement to the fans? If you just don't moan about the 3 players, Adam, either trust it. I don't think Brendan Rodgers is refusing players. I think that Celtic PLC are low-balling teams. That's the factual knowledge that we know so far. The board have made low offers for players, and Brendan Rodgers, his patience is wearing a bit thin with the fact that we are going in with low offers. And he spoke yesterday. He mentioned that on numerous occasions it's all about value for money, and he used the term value for money quite a lot yesterday. They should bring the AGM forward. They're not going to do that. And plus, people who go to the AGM, every that's a good one. Every year with the insane entitlement from fans, sack the board, blah blah blah. End of season, double trebles or win, you're happy, you hand your season ticket. BR being a snake again. Is he? It's a good one. And if you've ran a business before, mate, how can you not see that Brendan Rodgers isn't doing a single thing right at Celtic? He is the problem. Get Andrew O'Neill back. What can Brendan do? What can Brendan do? Brendan said in an interview last week, I am obviously not doing enough to convince the board of the players I need and want. It's the board that are holding us back, not Brendan Rodgers. Martin O'Neill was spending £6 million on a player. This board is reluctant to spend £6 million on a player. Ange Postecoglou wanted us to bring in players at 10 million and above. Fact. He said it. You can go and look back at the interviews of Ange Postecoglou saying, what's the difference? His exact words was along the lines of, what's the difference in spending 1 and 2 million on a player and turning them into a 10 to 15 million pound player? Where you can go down the road and spend a 10 million on a player and turn them into a 25, 30 million pound player. Quote Ange Postecoglou. That was his words. But some people think that Brendan Rodgers is the problem. Brendan Rodgers can only work with the players that he's got. He cannot convince the board any more than the players that he needs. He can only recommend the way that this board runs. And yesterday he spoke about the board looking for value for money. Not him, not Brendan. He spoke about the board and the people that run the club as looking for value for money. But it's Brendan Rodgers' fault, which I think is a crazy, crazy statement. And Martin O'Neill and Ange Postecoglou will never come back to manage Celtic. So it's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. And tell me what Brendan Rodgers is doing wrong, because all that he can affect is players going onto the pitch. That's all he can affect. But a lot of people are having a big rant about Brendan Rodgers as a fucking issue. This board isn't fit for purpose. Oh man. Anyway, let's finish off that poll. The poll was just a bit of a laugh, and but was it? Because we all know the way that Celtic go. After Brendan Rodgers, Celtic will go down the road of bringing in a cheap manager. That's for sure. Be careful what you wish for. Because even Chris Sutton said it. If I was in Brendan Rodgers' shoes, I'd be pissed off also. And I'm going to finish that poll off, even though we're just short of 200 votes. 91% said they wouldn't be happy with Paul Disdale, and Sean Maloney is number 2. And 91% said no. 8% said yes. Going to tell you one name. Ronnie Dyler. That wasn't a step forward, was it? It was a step backwards. Be careful what you wish for, Celtic fans. On that note, have an absolutely fantastic day, Celtic fans, wherever you are, all around the world.